For everyone with an interest in MASH, or more broadly, metabolic-associated steatotic liver disease, Surf's Up. Doesn't that roll off the tongue? Season 4, Episode 48 of Surfing the NASH Tsunami, our interviews with some of our best friends about what they're looking forward to at the Liver Meeting 2023, starts now.
Today on Surfing the NASH Tsunami.
We need to get to that point where people are comfortable prescribing digital therapeutics, making sure insurance companies see the value in this.
As we prepare for the Liver Meeting 2023, Surfing the NASH Tsunami is interviewing some of our guest opinion leaders on what they find most exciting about the upcoming agenda. Today, Roger Green speaks with hepatology researcher and key opinion leader Dr. Naim Alkhouri about presentations he will give in Boston and others he anticipates eagerly.
Hi, this is Roger Green, host of the podcast, soon to be officially rebranded Surfing the NASH Tsunami. This week, our plan was to record an episode on the liver risk score, but that fell apart at the last minute due to some conflicts that only emerged on Monday. We were unable to record this week. We hope to have that interview for you at a later point in time. So next on the release schedule, and pushed up a few days, was the preview run-up to the Liver Meeting 2023 from AASLD, which takes place in Boston starting on November 9. The original plan was to record several interviews that we would release on the week that starts on October 30th, but we are stepping that up a little bit. We will do one or two of them the end of this week, and 2, 3 or more over the course of next week. Each will be an individual interview with one of our favorite guests, discussing what that person anticipates most eagerly about TLM 2023. Today's interview is with our good friend Naim Alkhouri. Naim will be talking about some of the papers that he'll be presenting at the meeting, and we get into a discussion about a lot of exciting content around cirrhosis that should arise at this event. Hope you enjoy. So our next interview in our series of Liver Meeting 2023 warm-ups is with our good friend Naim Alkhouri. Naim, how are you this morning?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing fine, thanks. So this is a late time for you. Are you in Phoenix today? Arizona today?
I'm actually in our Ohio site today and getting ready for ASLD. I can't believe it's only in like 10 days. Very stressful time, but exciting time. So much is going on at this year's meeting.
Yeah, a lot is going on. And what we're doing this week is we're asking some of our friends and guests to comment on what you're presenting, what you're most excited about at the meeting. Let me just let you dive in. So what are you going to be sharing with people in ASLD in 10 days?
Yeah, honestly, there's a lot that we will be sharing this year. Several randomized controlled trials. Many of them are embargoed. We can't get into the details, but also many of them were associated with press releases, and they got a lot of attention even before the meeting. So we will be presenting data from the Duet trial. This is the combination trial with Terns Pharmaceuticals. They looked at the combination of their THR beta plus the FXR agonist. I'm excited about their THR beta, and this looks like potentially could be considered the second generation with less side effects in terms of diarrhea. But, as you know, THR beta class has been associated with very good tolerability. So overall, I'm optimistic about the whole class. Obviously, resmetirom is in the spotlight between now and March 14th, the PDUFA date, and we cannot wait to get our hands on resmetirom to prescribe in clinic. I'm actually scheduling my patients now to come back in April of 2024. Obviously, there'll be more data with resmetirom, more ancillary studies and post-hoc analyses, just looking at more safety and AE data. Everything is looking pretty good. We will be presenting some data also with 89 Bio and their FGF21 pegozafermin. This was a small cirrhotic cohort that also looks promising. Obviously, NASH cirrhosis has been in the spotlight last couple of weeks with the Akero press release with Symmetry. What we saw with pegozafermin is that there was a signal that maybe there's improvement in cirrhosis in terms of fibrosis regression. And to be honest with you, even with the Akero data, I was encouraged to see the delta from placebo. I was encouraged to see the PRO-C3 data, the NASH resolution rate. So I did not look at that press release as a negative one. I think the duration of the study was too short. Maybe the sample size size was too small, but I suspect that once we extend the treatment to 96 weeks, we will see a good signal. So that's also good news. There will be data presented from the NGM program also, aldafermin. As you know, they stopped development for NASH with F2, F3, but we had the Alpine 4 trial. That was the cirrhosis one, and the primary endpoint was improvement in the ELF score. But I think this is even more relevant now as we continue to struggle a bit with NASH cirrhosis. And in my mind, this therapeutic target FGF19 has potential also, and it showed good efficacy data. So I think there's potential that you may want to develop it for NASH cirrhosis. There will be other studies also, newer mechanisms of action like miracurlant. We will have a late breaker poster that will be presented. There is also new data with the North Sea with their structurally engineered fatty acid. So a lot is going on in terms of randomized controlled trials. I'm very excited to share the full data and see the reaction after we do the full presentations.
So that's exciting. I mean, first of all, it does feel like drug development is coming into a whole new era, right? Whereas meter are likely to be approved and new modes of action that look promising. Now, as we go along, we learn where the warts are in different medications. But, most, not to be overly Pollyanna-ish about this, but most medications have warts, right? And have bad moments. So it seems that the more different modes of actions we look at and the further we go down the path, we'll get some good surprises or we'll get some good news. Occasionally we'll get some bad surprises. But I take your point. I had a similar reaction to the efruxifermin data, which is that while it wasn't everything everybody hoped it would be, it seemed promising for the longer term. If there's good data on pegozafermin or promising data on pegozafermin, in your mind, does that reinforce differences between the two FGF21s, or is that a positive statement about FGF21 as a class, or some of each for that matter?
The way I see it, as you know, not all FGF21s are created equal, so it depends on the downstream signaling and, your activity on different receptors. But in my mind, pegozafermin and the Boston pharmaceutical FGF21 and efruxifermin, they actually signal to the three receptors, and I see it as a positive statement for this class of FGF21s, not the ones that just signal to the receptor 1C. So, any good data from pegozafermin, from Boston Pharmaceutical, from Akero, I see it as a statement for the whole class.
I thought it was interesting because I thought the aldafermin data, the first stuff that was released a couple of months ago, was really promising. I mean, maybe even surprisingly promising, given the what happened with fibrosis, although, as we all know, there was just one kind of funky cell there. And unfortunately, it was the cell in the middle, so people couldn't figure out what to do with it. How do you see, and cirrhosis is obviously a big issue, maybe the big issue, since it's the point in time where people are closest to grave liver events, and quality of life and feel function and survive all take a real turn for the worse at some point in the cirrhotic process. It's interesting that you chose to start on cirrhosis. Is it your sense that cirrhosis the treatment of cirrhosis will have a promising future over the next couple of years, or is it too early to say, do you think?
Well, I think we are getting there, to be honest with you, Roger. I never thought that in my career we will see treatments that can reverse cirrhosis, and this will be the primary endpoint of a clinical trial. Obviously, the concept is there. We've seen it with the treatment of hepatitis B, treatment of hep C, people that stop drinking alcohol. So cirrhosis is definitely reversible, but what we're getting at now is really potentially medications that can reverse cirrhosis, period. Obviously we're starting with NASH. Some of these medicines have their metabolic pathway of improving liver fibrosis, but we may get to a point where we use the same drugs to look at alcohol-associated cirrhosis, and who knows, we may explore them in other diseases if there is, established cirrhosis. So it's very exciting. I think it is the highest bar. I think, designing trials based on histology has been challenging. I think cirrhosis is a universe. It's really not just stage 4. So there's, stage 4 that can be divided based on ESHAC into 5 and 6. And then there's cirrhosis with clinically significant portal hypertension. And that can be also further divided. And then you get to the decompensated stage. So there's a lot. And as we learn more from companies like HistoIndex and PathAI and using continuous scales of, even stage 4, there's a lot that we need to learn in terms of how to design cirrhosis trials. What's emerging now is, if you want to focus on histology and cirrhosis regression on biopsy, you need to select early cirrhosis. So patients with a little bit higher platelet count, you need to may have a cap for liver stiffness on FibroScan, maybe do ESHAC-5. If you're going to do the Child-Pugh score, do Child-Pugh A5 only. These are more likely to regress on histology. If you want to design a protocol based on outcomes, which is really the holy grail, at least for the FDA at this point, to get full approval for cirrhosis, you need to go the opposite direction. You need to lower your platelet count, not have a cut point on liver stiffness, allow some clinically significant portal hypertension, but also not be too blind and include people where it's just too late. So you need to find that point of no return. And that point of no return also can be divided into point of no return on histology and point of no return on affecting outcomes. So a lot that we need to learn and figure out. And, as you know, easier said than done to find these patients that qualify for the trials. So I think it's very exciting next couple of years in NASH cirrhosis.
You make an interesting point. Well, let me amend that. I listen to what you're saying, and the content makes a really interesting point, which isn't exactly what you're talking about, but I think it matters. I've said this forever, that Nixon in 1969 declared the war on cancer only to learn that cancer was a whole bunch of different tumor types and subtypes and subtypes. If you think about an analysis of the impact of cirrhosis on life and on society, you get to a bunch of different issues, right? Portal hypertension has one set of effects. Frank decompensation has another set of effects. Where you look on the scale, everything you're talking about. Are we in a place yet to develop a more sophisticated viewpoint of how to think about the targets in cirrhosis? Because that's kind of what I hear you saying.
Yeah, we're definitely getting there. I mean, I think if you look at histoindex data, for example, in addition to the Q-fibrosis and the continuous scale, they have 184 variables for, fibrosis that they can look at. So we're getting to a level that, the science is more advanced than the clinical knowledge. And we just really don't know what this means. And I think we will figure it out, but it's going to take us probably a good decade before we get to that granularity and level of understanding how these fibrosis parameters potentially can affect outcomes. And the same can be said with other companies like PharmaNest and Bioselvia and PathAI. I think also we are learning more about, how different mechanisms of actions may affect the treatment outcome in terms of cirrhosis. And I think we are trying to also separate mechanisms of actions into those that target upstream and allow the liver in a way to heal itself versus pure antifibrotics that actually target fibrosis. So a lot to be learned, I guess. What's exciting is that I can tell you, obviously, Akero has a cirrhosis program. We have the program with Madrigal, but other companies are looking at this like 89 Bio. And hopefully, with more positive data in phase 2B, bigger companies will be getting into designing phase 3. And that will help us also gather more data in patients with NASH cirrhosis. Novo Nordisk, they have a program that includes patients from F2 to F4 with combination therapy that has FGF21 plus other therapeutic assets. So that's an exciting program. And as you've seen also in press releases and presentations, Merck and Boehringer Ingelheim, they have these dual agonists that have glucagon. And we're really trying to understand the effects of including the glucagon agonist on liver fibrosis. Ultimmune has promising data also, and they started their phase 2B. So if that's successful, they'll be designing a NASH cirrhosis trial. So a lot of excitement. And I'm also proud to say that, within the Summit Network, we have the Cirrhosis Advisory Board now that I'm chairing. And we're going to start a series of webinars in December to talk about NASH cirrhosis trial design, patient identification, outcomes. And this will be a quarterly webinar that we will do, and you'll hear more about it in the near future.
That's fantastic. Very exciting. A lot of good things going on. Let's run all the way around to the other side of the world, or the other side of the conceptual world. I noticed that you're doing an event there. I think it's an MTE, is it, on digital therapeutics?
Yes, it's a Meet the Expert session. You're absolutely right, and I'm very excited to chair this one with Dr. Sonal Kumar. She's at Cornell, very good friend, established a multidisciplinary team. The way I see it, and I'll present this in a more eloquent way at the meeting, but when we think about digital therapeutics, you have things like Noom, which is an app that anyone can download and start using as a way to lose weight to help their fatty liver disease. And then you have digital therapeutics that are prescription-based, like Better Therapeutics. They're actually FDA approved for diabetes now under the name Aspire RX. And it's very fascinating, Roger. I'm looking into actually incorporating this into my clinic for my diabetic patients because you can improve A1C. It's a 90-day prescription in a way. You get the app for 90 days. It has to be prescribed by a physician. It goes to a digital pharmacy, and then you have to get it prior authorized by insurance. Then insurance is supposed to pay for it. So I actually have my clinic admin now in communication with the Better Therapeutic team to see how we can prescribe this. And then the ultimate goal is to have a digital platform where you incorporate an app, so a digital therapeutic, but also you have a way to do remote monitoring of patients. You have a way to connect them with potentially a coordinator of their care, someone who can advise them when they have questions. And eventually, I would like to use this as a way to treat patients remotely with televisits and be able to prescribe medications like resmetirom. So these are the three levels of digital therapeutics that I'll be discussing. Again, the regular apps, the prescription apps, and then finally a digital platform.
So the digital platform idea that's not something you and I've talked about, at least in the past. That's really a fascinating idea. I mean, it makes sense, right? In a sense, it's an extension of an electronic medical record, one generation therapeutically and one generation in terms of data integration all at the same time. But that sounds fantastically promising.
Yeah, and we are actually, starting to use this in our clinics with the app or, a digital platform called Liver Healthy. So this has been implemented. Obviously, the biggest issue with digital therapeutics in general has been insurance coverage. Once we get to that point, I think the field is going to take off. Without this, we're kind of doomed. So we need to get to that point where people are comfortable prescribing digital therapeutics, making sure insurance companies see the value in this. So
that involves outcomes. Is there outcomes work being done on digital therapeutics that will produce that kind of data, those kinds of numbers?
This is what we're doing currently, trying to generate outcomes and show the value. I think in diabetes, it's been done in the context of randomized controlled trials. In fatty liver disease, we did a pilot study, but we need to do a randomized controlled trial with, instead of placebo, we call it a sham app. So it's an app that looks like it's the real deal, but it's not.
I'm going to ask you one more question because I know you're in a rush this morning. What else should people be looking for at this meeting that you're going to be not presenting at, but attending or watching that you think is really going to be interesting?
I would say the biggest news is really the implementation of the new nomenclature. I apologize to the audience that I'm still using old terminology. I should never use NASH anymore. But anyway, it's not easy, and I think everyone realizes it's going to take a minute. And I think we have a big plan through AASLD, several events talking about the nomenclature, the implementation plans, several discussions on the scientific end, like, discussions with the NIH and funding agencies on the regulatory and also with FDA and EMA, and also in terms of publications, big journals like Hepatology, Journal of Hepatology, and just thinking about how this new nomenclature is going to affect everything that we do day to day in practice. So we need new ICD-10 codes. We need insurance providers to recognize the new terminology. We need also to educate, other specialties about the implications and why we had to change the name and why we had to do it now. I think there are so many misconceptions out there. People don't understand why it had to be done now. And I think we do have the answers. We all know the answers within AASLD, but getting the word out to the rest of the world is very important. And you'll see several events about nomenclature.
So in 30 seconds before we jump off, why? Why did it have to happen now?
The reason is because, there was a name change that happened without scientific consensus with MAFL, and there was a change in definition that would have had great implications for drug development and biomarker development. And we had to really act quickly to make sure that name change will not affect everything that has been done in the field. So that was the urgency. And I think this piece is lost on so many people. They think it had to do with people trying to publish papers or egos, and honestly, it has nothing to do with this. If you ask all of us that have been involved in the process, we realize we have bigger priorities. I think it was just to preserve everything that has been done in the field and make sure that we're not taking two steps back with all the progress that we've made.
Okay, so here's what I just heard you say, and then tell me yes, no, maybe so, and then we'll jump. A lot of people believed that the name change came about because folks wanted to redefine the disease, and that the problem there was that they didn't take into adequate account the effect it would have on byproducts like drug development. What you're saying is almost the reverse. The change got made, or some people made the change, and then the reason to undertake this effort was to protect commercial interests and drug development and everything else that's so pivotal to real patient lives as compared to merely publication of papers. Do I get that right?
Yeah, because it wasn't really just a name change. There was a definition change, and that was important. And obviously, we wanted to get feedback from patients and, get their preference. And I think the word fatty was stigmatizing. So that's another aspect of it. But I think the urgency had to do with this more than anything else.
Hey, Naim, thank you so much for your time this morning. And I'll see you on the podcast a week from Monday and then in Boston. Thank you, my friend.
All right, take care.
Bye-bye. Hope you enjoyed that interview. We will not have a business section this week. I will be back probably tomorrow with the next of our 2023 liver meeting lead-in interviews. Until then, stay safe, surf on. We'll see you on the podcast. Bye-bye now.
Have any questions for the surfers? You can send them to surfingnash.com, and we will answer on the podcast or the website.